My name is Mary Pembroke. I was hired in 1990 to join the community affairs team. At the time that I was hired, my addition brought the group to 5. We were part of law and corporate affairs, but community affairs was a very small part of that. I was born in Overlake Hospital in Bellevue. My father was born in Seattle. My grandfather was born in Seattle. My great-grandfather was born in Seattle. So I'm a 5th-generation Seattleite. Outdoors was really important to my family, and community was very important to my family. My mom would be putting on her raincoat and then going door to door in the neighborhood to knock on doors for the Cancer Society drive or any other cause that needed volunteers. So that role modeling was important for me. My parents both went to University of Washington. My grandmother went to University of Washington. So naturally, all of our kids went to Washington State University. You have to rebel at some point. So yeah, that's where I went. Followed my sister and my brother over to Pullman. I studied English and political science. At a certain point, my advisor called me in and said, "It's time to declare a major. What are you thinking?" And she said, "You pretty much are an English major now based on your transcript." So that was it. And then I did what most English majors do. I moved up to San Juan Island and got a job waiting tables and drank a lot of red wine and wrote bad poetry. Okay, not so much, but I did wait tables. And then I signed on with a temp agency and temped at a law firm as a receptionist. And then they hired me because I was trying to decide if I was going to go to graduate school or not. And so I would tell the attorneys there, trying to decide. I said to one of them one day, "If I go to grad school, I'll be 27 when I finish." And he said, "How old will you be if you don't go?" I'll never forget that. Peter Parsons. Thank you. And about that time, this was a tiny law firm, they said, "Hey, guess what? We're merging." This was the 80s, so law firms merging. And so they said, "We're merging with a bigger firm, mid-sized firm. Scheidler, McBroom, Gates, and Lucas. 40 lawyers or so. Do you want to come along?" And I thought, okay, still haven't decided. Yeah, I'll come along. So I go along. I'm still being a receptionist, I think, at that point. And one day, an attorney who always sort of looked like an absent-minded professor came walking down the hall and said, "We need to computerize our files." Now, that sounded funny because there were no computers in the firm. Like, there was a word processing department where everybody typed the handwritten yellow legal pad, from the lawyers. Attorneys did not have computers. So essentially, I ended up at some point with a computer and going to computer classes to learn RBase so I could build a relational database, which I did, which sounds so funny now. But I did that. That was fun. So they just kept handing me. And then they said, "Hey, guess what? We're merging with a big firm called Preston. Do you want to come along?" And so I chatted with the people at Preston, and I'm not kidding you. When they were interviewing the staff to see who would come along, she gave me a set of index cards that had every letter of the alphabet, and she asked me, they were all mixed up, and she asked me if I could alphabetize the cards. Yeah, so and I got hired. I ended up managing that office. They made me office manager, and then I was attorney recruiting manager, which is my second favorite job I ever had, because when you're recruiting lawyers, they're coming into town for the summer to be summer associates, and you're showing off your city. This is my city. Let's go rafting. Let's go hiking. Let's go take the ferry. Let's go eat at this new place called Edda's down at the market. You take them to all the good restaurants. So they just kept giving me interesting jobs. And then one day, Bill Gates Sr. said, "Will you help me with the United Way campaign?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." He was chairing the campaign that year. He was just salt of the earth, very committed to the community, a very thoughtful person. He had a terrific laugh, and literally, when you say someone has a twinkle in their eye, that would be him. He had this twinkle in his eye. And the first campaign I helped him with at the firm, he came in on the last day, and was an enormous man. I mean, you talk about what is his presence. His physical presence was enormous. Came in, framed in the doorway, and he said, "How did we do? Did we reach our goal?" And we had raised $60,000. I remember that. And our goal had been like 59 something. And I said, "We did." And he just burst out into this big grin and just enveloped me in this hug. He was that committed. He said, if we could get every person in this law firm on a bus to go out and see the work that's going on, we would have 100% participation. Everybody would want to give. So I was so inspired by him. I was so inspired by him and by helping him with the campaign and getting to know the nonprofits that I decided that's what I want to do. I want to work in a nonprofit. So I eventually did not go to grad school, but I went to Washington Special Olympics and was an area director. And I applied for it and I got it. And there's nothing like when you're working with Special Olympics. There is nothing like when you have planned an event, you've trained the volunteers, you've done the marketing, you've raised the funds to make it happen. You're standing on the finish line and a 5-year-old Down syndrome girl comes over that finish line. There is no feeling like that. It was a fantastic job. I worked at Special Olympics for a year, loving it. And one day I got a phone call from a friend of mine who had been at the law firm, but had since gone out to Microsoft into the legal department. Bob Gomel-Kaiowitz. "There's a job out here at Microsoft," he said, "running the employee campaign in community affairs with this wonderful woman named Bonnie Tabb. You should put your hat in the ring." So I got the phone call from Bob. I applied. I guess I sent my resume in, paper, in the mail, I'm sure. Got the call for the interview. Came into Building 8, met Bonnie Tabb, who is one of the most warm and gracious people you could ever know. Went into her office, sat down for my 1-hour interview, and anybody who knows Bonnie Tabb knows it was not going to be an hour. It was 1 hour, then it was 2 hours, then it was 2.5 hours, and then suddenly she looked at her watch and she goes, "I gotta go get my kids." Grabs her purse, runs out the door. I believe we hugged as she ran out the door. And I left the campus, I left Building 8, and stopped at my parents' house on the way home because they still lived in Bellevue. And happened to arrive there at the cocktail hour, about 5:30, have a glass of wine with my parents and told them about this wonderful woman that I just met and how I loved her and this job sounded amazing. And I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. If they offer me this job, I feel like the stars have lined up for this to happen. I don't know how I could ever be so fortunate. I don't know what to do. What a decision. And my father was a banker in downtown Seattle. He was a very practical man. And he gave me this bemused look and said, "You're currently working for a nonprofit for peanuts, and this amazing company might offer you a job, and I don't see where the decision is here," he said. So I went back to my little studio apartment in downtown Seattle and sat down and cried, honestly, because I knew if the offer came, and I kind of thought it might, because I would have to take it and I would want to take it, but it meant leaving behind those 5-year-old Down syndrome girls coming over the finish line. And I knew that would be hard. I knew it would be a different kind of experience with the nonprofit community. I started at a time that was really pivotal in the world of workplace giving campaigns. As we were beginning to plan the campaign in my first initial weeks here, I had a request for a meeting. It was a meeting with one of the early hires, female engineers. She was hired in the 80s. And she had some ideas about changes we should make to the Microsoft campaign. She wanted the campaign to be completely open so that people could give to any nonprofit they wanted. And she wanted the matching gifts limit to be raised as well. At that time when I started, you had to run the larger part of your match through United Way to get it. So that was not a restriction that was popular with Microsoft employees. So Therese Stoll came to my office with a petition in her back pocket that had been signed by 600 people. Now, at that time, there were less than 6,000 people at the company. She was chairing the Women's Funding Alliance that year, which supports a lot of women's causes, amazing organization. And she wanted to change. And she was going to push against the status quo and let me know what her vision was. And she thought this should happen. When I think about planning for that meeting, it wasn't just the topic of the meeting, but the group of women who had been hired in the 80s as engineers, I was a bit in awe of them, and I still get a little shiver. They were amazing women. So after my meeting with Therese, that did lead to my first Bill G meeting. So the meeting with Bill G to discuss changes to the campaign and the matching was, inspired by the enthusiastic conversation I had with Therese in my office. And we had worked up a proposal from the group, trying to walk the line about what would work within the company, what should we do, what's right for the employees. On the other hand, Bill's family was very dedicated to United Way. And so that was a significant consideration. So we went up and gave him our proposal, and he listened and he listened. And I also proposed raising the matching limit all the way up. Forget all these restrictions. Let's take it up to $12,000 per employee per year. And he listened. And then he looked at me and he said, "Have you done the math on that?" And I had this moment. I was looking out the window at, Lake Bill and the woods, and he said that. I just had this moment of thinking, does anybody come in here not having done the math? That would be truly terrifying. Anyway, he had no problem with the numbers. It was really a discussion around what would this mean if we make these changes and let our employees give wherever they want and without necessarily running it through United Way. So we were coming into this moment in corporate affairs where we understood that what we did as a company was going to be watched, was going to be discussed, and was going to have a ripple effect. So let's tread carefully with the decisions that we make. Campaigns changed pretty radically after that. I can't say we were the linchpin, but it did shift the paradigm from the 1950s United Way workplace giving campaign to this idea of empowering employees to support whatever causes they cared the most about. I saw the culture at Microsoft with regard to giving shift significantly in the years that I was here. I saw people begin to wrestle with that, quite frankly. A lot of the folks who landed here did not come from great wealth. They came from families that may have prized education, but a lot of people came from middle-class backgrounds. And so when they were coming to terms with this sudden, the stock would split, and they would come in and sit down and say, what should I be doing? How should I be doing this? And so we counseled a lot of people, one-on-one on that. And then as the years went by, we started putting on larger events where we would bring in people from all over the country and talk about what can you be doing? How could you be doing it? What kind of organized philanthropic vehicles exist that you might want to use? So it grew and much more sophisticated towards the end of my time. And the phones were ringing because Microsoft was capturing the imagination around the world, and the world was beginning to call back and say, well, what are you going to do for us? At that point, the company our mission statement was to support the communities where our employees live and work, which is very broad in the world of philanthropy. But most of the employees were here in Seattle, so we were deeply in discussion with the nonprofits around King County. But we were getting letters from all over the world. I think what I loved most about it, because I was a fairly independent person, was that I could create my own job. I felt supported. I felt empowered. If I had an idea, I could run with it. And that was just in our little group. I'm proud of a lot of the things that we accomplished in that group. It was the whole group, obviously. I don't feel like I can, lay claim to some big moment, some big change that I made, but a lot of it was just the small changes. The people who came into my office and wanted to talk about how they could personally start to give. It was an exciting time in philanthropy in Seattle, the 90s. Like technology and philanthropy were intersecting on a lot of levels. And that was an exciting place to be. So whatever part I played in encouraging people to give, that makes me feel good. I think one of the takeaways I had was if you have an idea, if you have something that you want, if you want to push back against a structure or an older paradigm, there's something that you want to achieve, but you don't know if there's anybody who's going to, listen to you or be interested, go with that instinct and keep pushing forward. Meet with the people you have to meet with. If you don't get a response right away, try somewhere else. Follow those instincts that you have.